Well, this is a chat I look forward to bringing you every Monday. The wonderful Alan Jones is joining me now to discuss a couple of issues on his mind. He's coming to us now from Sydney. I have to start with Victoria. I'm down here in the Pariah State. You're in the Free State of New South Wales. Over the weekend, Alan, we saw this new hashtag start up, I Stand With Dan, presumably against the Murdoch press and media like Sky News, who have been critical personally of Daniel Andrews, his leadership in this issue, but the government more broadly. Even his wife took to Twitter to use it, and there was comparisons between him and the Prime Minister, who was at the football, as we know, over the weekend. But there's an interesting tweet I picked up from the Australian's reporter Rachel Baxendale. This piqued my interest. She said Andrews has more advisors, or had more advisors in his office than there were people in the entire state's public health team at the start of this pandemic. You've seen a lot of leaders. How do you rate Daniel Andrews?
Well, you're asking the wrong person. I don't rate him at all. Basically, Victoria, as you know, is bankrupt. I mean, if it was a corporation, it would be put into liquidation. But Victorians don't seem to worry about this level of debt. We've then got the Belt and Road Initiative. We signed up to China. Obviously, he believes that he gets into a tight spot economically. China will bail him out. And his handling of this whole coronavirus thing is a disgrace. I mean, to allow the kind of protests that there were. But I will just say this, Peter. I'm not confused. I'm just saying I'm confused. But I think people are entitled to be confused. If, on the other hand, this outbreak, on one hand, is the crisis that everyone's talking about, then you can't say that and then on the next breath say, oh, we must open up the economy. Now, of course, I've been arguing, and you and I have been arguing for months and months and months, this should have been opened up. Scott Morrison said on the 15th of March that for most people, this will be 8 out of 10 of the people will have nothing worse than a flu. The others are elderly, Indigenous, and people with a precondition are at risk. Well, the World Health Organization says the figures are even better than that. That is, 99% of people who get this thing are mild. There's only 1% around the world where people are beyond the mild. That is critical. Now, already we've got the Australian figures indicate there's a handful of people, I think now 17 in intensive care, most of them in Victoria, and about 40-odd in hospital. Now, if 40-odd people in hospital and 17 in intensive care represents a pandemic, the word has lost its meaning. And I think when people say, and business are fed up with this, I mean, you take your state of Victoria, the whole area in the northwest of Victoria has never seen coronavirus. And they're being locked out of crossing the border and doing business with New South Wales. So we've got to work out what the issue is here. Is this thing the quote-unquote crisis that everyone says it is? Or is it, as Scott Morrison said on the 15th of March, for 8 out of 10, the World Health Organization says 99%, nothing worse than a bad flu. Now, they say, listen to the experts. Well, Peter Doherty is a Nobel Prize laureate, and the institute in Melbourne is named after him. And Peter Doherty said at the weekend, the level of the contagion likely from this is no worse than a bad flu. And he said, certainly not as lethal as measles. Now, we've whipped all these poor people living like battery hens up into anxiety. I mean, kids are not going back to school. God knows what this is going to do to them. And I think business here, they've taken a long time to climb off the fence, but they're now saying, can we get back to business? And if people...
But the problem with this from the get-go was you and I argued it should be a very hard lockdown, but a short lockdown, a serious lockdown.
Correct.
We said the national borders should be closed and people should be paid their real wages. Correct. So you wouldn't have this calamity of young people. You know, we know 2/3 of casuals earn more now, so there's a disincentive for them to go back to work. We know a lot of people with families are going to struggle to pay their mortgages.
Absolutely.
They'll come back and try and open up businesses that just will not exist. The problem is we were half pregnant there for a very long time, and once we got the virus suppressed, we kept importing it as every Australian came home infected with the virus. And our risk point was the entry into hotel quarantine, which every other place, every other jurisdiction managed with the uniforms of the military or the police. Victoria put it in charge of a minister who the union connected to him has earned the union members of private contractors, not the actual union, but they've all earned millions of dollars out of running private security operations in these
looking
hotels
after their mates
that were hopeless.
Looking after their mates. They were completely untrained.
They were porous. But the problem is now he's making the rules and everyone in Victoria is in this position.
Well, as Greg Sheridan said,
hellish.
democracy is dead. The Parliament doesn't meet. The opposition is poor, and Andrews believes he can do as he likes. But I do come back to the point that I want to make, because I think the media have enormous power here. And the obligation, when you've got a microphone or a forum, is to tell the public the truth. And that's what disappoints me about government. Scott Morrison said on the 15th of March, for 8 people out of 10, it's nothing more than a bad flu. There are a vulnerable group, let's look after them. Now, we should be saying they've lost that message, and now we're suggesting breathlessly there's another 200 have got the virus, and another 200 have tested positive. Well, if they've tested positive, tell us, please, whether they're critical or not, whether they're at risk or they're not. And the figures worldwide suggest that they're not. Now, that means, can we please get on with our lives, accept individual responsibility, let's be tested, let's do the things we're being told to do to quarantine us from any kind of difficulty in relation to the virus. And that's the level of personal responsibility that I thought a Liberal government anyway ought to apply, but they seem to have lost their way as well. Gladys Berejiklian saying, oh, we've got to hang on. Hang on to what? I mean, I think there are 3 people in hospital in New South Wales, and they're threatening to close borders.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't feel like that, though, Alan. To be fair, in Victoria, we had all of those reports last week that the promised ventilation equipment, that the promised expansions of hospitals were all put on hold, presumably for cost-saving measures back in April when we thought we'd beaten this thing. So no one has confidence in Victoria, in the Andrews government, in the ministers and the whole bit. Hey, just very, very quickly, Acland, it's back in the news today, this new Acland coal mine expansion. Where's that up to? What do you think about it? You grew up there. You know it better than anybody.
How much time have you got? What a disgrace. Look, yes, I did. And there's an outfit there. I'm all in favour of coal mining. And I know Matt Canavan, whom I think is a very bright man and I hope at the side, he disagrees with me on this. But I'd say that the people who are arguing in favour of the coal mine don't know anything about the place. Look at those pictures. This is prime agricultural land. It's classified as amongst the top 1.5% of land in Queensland. There was a land court hearing that lasted 100 days. Everyone had their chance to present their case, and the mining company, New Hope, No Hope we call them, were thrown out of court on every front. The land court said the lease should not be issued and that it didn't meet appropriate environmental requirements. As well, it criticised and condemned the behaviour of New Hope Coal. Well, of course, they've got a lot of money, and they've appealed and gone to the courts against poor, struggling farmers, one of whom, Aileen Harrison, is 84 years of age, and New Hope are now suing them for costs. Now, at the end of the day, they won the appeal, and this thing's gone on, but the clause that got them, New Hope, out of trouble, or that condemned the farmers, was the Court of Appeal found that the land court had no right to consider the water issue. Now, if you're talking about issuing a licence to a coal mine on prime agricultural land, and you can't discuss the water issue, then what the hell are you talking about? So I'm in favour of coal. I'm totally opposed to this extension. These people are already breaking the law. They are already operating in a pit, which is part of stage 3, which they don't have aren't entitled to do. They get a piddling fine and get on with the job. It's a very... You've got to go and talk to some of these people. I mean, Glenn Butel I went to school with. He's the last man standing. They bought every house...
And you're going to cover this tonight?
I am.
You're going to cover this tonight?
I am.
Excellent.